Yeah, as a committee, obviously, I think most of the island watched the events unfold in Laxey, and my hearts go out to the people in Laxey and the surrounding islands. A massive thank you to the island, with regard to their response, the emergency services, the public. I mean, this is again where the Isle of Man is at the height of its sort of community spirit, when everybody just piles in to try and help neighbours and help communities. And I was sat at home yesterday watching the events unfolding. I was obviously helping a few constituents in Onken as well that needed help. But when I saw some of the comments that were coming through on social media, I suddenly felt that this, the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee may have to interact on this. So towards last night, I sent an email after speaking to my colleagues on that committee, Chris Robershaw and Claire Barber, MHKs, and we felt that it was right to reach out to the DOI, to DEFA and to the MUA to establish some of the facts that what's going on in Glen Road. Obviously now we've had the interview from Alex Allenson, the chairman of the MUA, who's confirmed that the work was being done in respect of the MUA. So as a committee, our job is to look at and scrutinise two departments, and I feel we need to start asking questions on behalf of residents affected in Glen Road in order to get some answers as quickly as possible.
We've heard time and time again from residents, at least, that for many that this is, as I keep saying, the third time coming for a lot of people, that homes have been for the third time flooded in the last 10 years, two of which are in the last 4 years. Is the time for scrutiny and discussion over and the time for action now? Well,
I think there's two answers there, really. If we take the events of yesterday, they were completely different to the events in 2015, when we obviously had a bridge collapse and a bus, completely lifted the river sort of levels and flooded properties. I think yesterday I definitely felt that some of the water coming out of onto the Glen Road actually was because of the wall was breached, and I think we've got to seriously look at those. Yes, the government has to take action with regard to these once-in-a-year events, which we now know is happening more frequently. We know that we are getting heavier sets of rain, we're getting more snow, we're getting hotter weather, so we're getting these extreme weather patterns. So that's a government. As a government, the Isle of Man government needs to look at that and set in some real firm policies to address these and to prepare the Isle of Man better. In respect of yesterday, I think it's absolute right that our scrutiny committee starts asking questions about actually the events surrounding why this hole was, this breach in the wall happened in October, not earlier on in the summer when the weather was better to do this weather.
Well, Dr. Allenson said the breach has been there for weeks, so this is ongoing works that I believe haven't quite finished on time.
I think there is serious questions to ask why the breach, why this particular schedule of work was not done earlier in the year, in July, August, whatever, something where the weather was fine. I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about the amount of debris that came down that river, especially with trees. As I think Martin Perkins, MHK, has already mentioned, maybe we have to look at that weir. Is that weir have always a contributing factor to those rivers' increased levels? So there's a lot of questions to be asked.
With that weir, that was something I certainly heard from residents on Glen Road in Laxey, is that should have been removed years ago. And it's something they've been shouting about to politicians and people at Manx Utilities, those in the river wardens even. They need to get rid of it, despite its historic assets or whatever you like to call it. It is a hazard, and like we've seen, is perfectly demonstrated with what happened yesterday.
I think we've got to start listening to those concerns. And yeah, I know people say that, there's enough talking going on, but our committee looks at these things. We can take evidence from individuals and from organisations to try and establish the facts surrounding what happened yesterday, and then issue a report if we need to. I think
How quickly can that happen? Because issuing reports, it just sounds like paperwork and time.
It does, but this can go in conjunction with anything that the MUA may do, the Council of Ministers may do, or the Isle of Man government may do. It runs aside. It's a sort of independent arm's length from the Parliament, if you take my understanding, because what we can do is actually scrutinise this and find out exactly what happens. Now, what we are doing is being proactive to show the people of Laxey that we are taking the whole of this sort of scenario that unfolded tragically yesterday, and we're taking the comments that people are already sending through very, very seriously, and we are going to investigate this. Yes, it'll take time. I will not interfere with what the MUA need to do, or the Council of Ministers needs to do, or the DOI or DEFA. But what we can do is start getting some answers for those residents living in Laxey, and we can ensure the people of Laxey that we are listening to their concerns, and we're trying our best to sort of reach out to these government departments already to say, give us an overview of what's happened the last 2 days. Why was the wall breached? Should the work have been undertaken in October? Is there anything that we could have learned from these lessons to make sure it never happens again? I know that's another cliche that's always used. Realistically, trees need to be cut back. There needs to be a proper maintenance of groundworks, and sewerage works needs to be undertaken across the island. There was flooding in my constituent of Onken yesterday, and I genuinely believe that is because leaves have fallen on our roads again, blocked up guttering, and there's just not enough work being undertaken to sweep our roads in the autumn when leaves start coming down. Then we get these deluges of rain coming in, and then everyone complains that property's been flooded. There's not enough work going on by government departments such as DEFA, such as DOI, to make our roads accessible enough to remove this water from our landscape and from roads and estates and everything else.
How urgently do we need to see change here? This disaster this time around was on the 1st of October, so it couldn't be sooner in the season, really. And realistically, it's only going to get worse. I mean, Manx winters are notoriously treacherous at the best of times. What can be done from now to make sure this doesn't happen again, even worse?
Well, I think it's up to the DOI and to DEFA and to the MUA to demonstrate to the Manx public that they are taking these concerns seriously, and they are going to start implementing a schedule of work, towards the end of September, going into October, actually trying to clear some of these leaves, making sure the gullies are empty. And
so
making
extra
sure
money really needs to go into it, doesn't
I think
it?
there does need some investment to make sure that the island's infrastructure is prepared for the autumn period and then for the winter period. And I don't think that happens. And there's always a reaction after the events. What we do need is to be more proactive and get more things done in ahead of the autumn season and then ahead of the winter season, in order to go through that very difficult 4 months period. As you say, it rains on the Isle of Man. It rains very heavily on the Isle of Man. On occasion, we get snow, but we need to prepare for these events, which seem to be more frequent than where they were in the previous 10, 15 years.
Just finally, in your role on the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee, recently you recused yourself from matters facing the promenade refurbishment works. Is that the extent of your withdrawal then? Are you still very much active in other areas on the island?
Absolutely. From the Policy Review Committee, I am the chairman of that committee. I sort of removed myself of the promenade. I also removed myself off the harbour strategy because there was a connection with DFE. What we're looking at here is there's some serious questions need to be asked about Glen Road. The committee has been very proactive. We've sent an email very quickly to two government departments and a statutory board to say, give us an overview of what's happened over the last couple of days. We may, in due course, take evidence from those three parties and the ministers and hold them account for what's actually happened. But we also need to fully understand those events and then obviously try and give some sort of report. But in the meantime, we're actually listening to those constituents in Laxey in order to get the ball rolling and for the departments to give us that evidence so we can start building the picture of what went wrong yesterday.